Picture the scene. You're at your best friend's birthday party, and out of the corner of your eye, you see something terrifying. As you slowly turn to face it, your sense of dread and anxiety builds. And then you see it. The party balloon. Now, this may seem like it's the plot of a low-budget horror movie. However, for a small number of people, this is a real lived experience at many celebratory events. For these people may be suffering with what's known as globophobia, or the fear of balloons. In today's episode, we'll be taking a look at the psychology of globophobia. We'll be taking a look at how it emerges, the real social implications that it can have for sufferers, as well as exploring some of the psychological treatments that are available to help sufferers of globophobia. So sit back, relax, and let's delve into the psychology of globophobia. The word globophobia has both Latin and Greek origins. From Latin we have the word globos, which means round or spherical, and from Greek we have phobos or phobia, which is an intense fear. Combined, globophobia really means the fear of round circular objects. However, generally speaking, we extrapolate this to mean the fear of balloons. The number of people living with globophobia can be quite tricky to pin down. Often people suffering from the fear of balloons find it difficult to disclose their fear to friends and family members out of fear of being judged. For people who don't have globophobia, it can be a tricky fear to understand. After all, party balloons are often associated with joy and celebration. They're often the set pieces to many of our celebratory events, from weddings to graduations to birthday parties. However, it's this fear of disclosing globophobia to others that can lead to some of the significant social impacts associated with this fear. Unlike other phobias, like aerophobia, which is the fear of flying, people with globophobia have limited options available to them to navigate and engineer their environments to help them manage their fears. With something like aerophobia, the individual can tailor their plans and communicate these with others to explain why they've made differences to their environment. So for example, they could say, I'll be taking the train to this event just because I'm frightened of flying. And there's often no judgment attached with this, and people can understand change in the behaviour. However, with globophobia, there are very limited options available to the individuals to help them manage the environment so that they can protect themselves from the feelings of anxiety and dread attached with their fear of balloons. As I've mentioned, many of our celebratory events in our lives often involve balloons being present. They're one of the most common decorations for joyous events. There's a whole host of social situations where balloons will usually be present. Now this puts people who have globophobia in a little bit of a social quandary. People with globophobia will find it difficult to tell their friends and family that one of the reasons why they might not want to go to an event is because they're frightened of balloons. And because they can't explain the reasons for their behaviour, it leaves them with two options. They can either attend the event, taking on the risk of the anxiety and the sense of dread that balloons might be present in the environment, or they can choose to decline to go to the event in the first place. So this has the advantage of it avoids putting them in a situation where balloons will be present, but it comes at very significant social costs. After all, there are only so many times you can decline celebratory events before people start to question whether you're truly their friend or not, or whether you actually want to celebrate this person's achievements with them. So as we can see, it can be very difficult for people with globophobia to engineer their social environments in the same way that people with other more common fears can. And this can lead to feelings of social isolation and breakdowns in social relationships. And that's why research published in the British Medical Journal has suggested that globophobia is a phobia that would benefit from psychological treatment. So how does globophobia actually emerge in the first place? Well, one of the reasons put forward for globophobia emerging in individuals is due to early childhood exposure to balloons popping in the near vicinity. This tends to create an association between balloons popping and feelings of intense anxiety and fear. Evidence for this can actually be found in clinical settings. So generally speaking, what we tend to find is that individuals who come in with globophobia tend to be fine handling uninflated balloons, and it's only when the balloon itself is inflated and is potentially at risk of popping is when the anxiety and sense of dread begins to kick in. Therefore, it appears to be the act of the balloon popping or exploding that is the source of globophobia, rather than the balloon as a physical object in and of itself. So how can globophobia be treated? Well, fortunately, psychologists have developed a number of different intervention techniques to help support individuals overcome many types of phobia. One of the most common approaches to treating phobias is cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as CBT. In general, cognitive behavioral therapy is an approach where we help an individual to identify unhelpful thought patterns or behavioral patterns, and to take steps to modify those in a healthier way that helps promote and protect their sense of well-being. CBT is often one of the frontline treatments for many clinical conditions. We can also explore one technique that Brewer developed to help individuals overcome globophobia in a clinical setting in around about 1 hour. Brewer's method practically involves systematic desensitization to the balloon as a stimuli, and particularly desensitizing the individual to the sense of fear and dread attached to balloons exploding. So let's take a look at what this method actually entails. As always, if you do feel like you need any treatment for a clinical medical condition, please do always reach out to your healthcare provider first. So Brewer's approach is a 7-step process. In the first stage, what we'll do is we'll bring the individual with globophobia into the setting with us, and we'll introduce them to an uninflated balloon. We'll start with the psychologist or the psychotherapist handling the balloon in front of them, and then provide the individual with an opportunity to handle the uninflated balloon themselves. As I mentioned earlier, it's often a very easy first step for an individual with globophobia to handle an uninflated balloon, as it's generally the experience of the popping rather than the balloon itself that is the source of the anxiety and fear. The second step in the process is to partially inflate the balloon itself. So here we incrementally increase the inflation of the balloon, and we demonstrate that it can be handled roughly without any risk of it popping. So the idea here is to get the individual used to the fact that partially inflated balloons don't really pop and they don't really burst or explode in a loud manner, and so these become associated with being safe as well. The third step involves reaching a point where the individual can handle and be in the presence of a fully inflated balloon. So once the individual is comfortable being in an environment where there is a fully inflated balloon present, that's when we can begin to transition into the next stage, which involves the actual popping and the bursting of the balloon itself. So in essence, the next step is to go back towards the beginning again. So we partially inflate the balloon, but this time we get to points where we can start to pop the balloon. So we start with the lowest possible inflation of the balloon and then pop that. And then as confidence builds with this process, we inflate the balloon more and more, popping it each time so that the individual becomes comfortable with the balloon inflating and then popping at different levels. Once the individual is comfortable with the inflated balloon being popped in their presence, the next step in the process is to reduce the distance between the balloon popping and the individual with globophobia themselves. So again, we do this in an incremental process. So we'll start by popping the balloon relatively far away from the individual, and then we'll gradually decrease that distance between the practitioner and the individual. The next step in the process is to transition from the practitioner popping the balloon to handing the balloon over to the individual themselves and asking them to pop the balloon. So the aim here is to help support individuals to become comfortable with balloons being in the environment in general, then to become comfortable with balloons popping in the environment, and then to build confidence in individuals being able to pop the balloons directly themselves. So we repeat this process as many times as it takes for the individual to feel comfortable with this whole routine. So then what we'll do is we'll give the individual some homework so they can continue to practice this routine in their own time and find spaces themselves where they would like to practice. And over time, this will help to build that individual's confidence and comfort with balloons being in the environment. Now, this treatment option can be very helpful in supporting individuals to overcome globophobia. As we saw at the beginning of the video, untreated globophobia can have some really significant social implications if individuals are choosing to tailor their environment to avoid balloons by also avoiding significant social events. So hopefully by participating in psychological therapies, individuals with globophobia are able to fully enjoy those celebratory events with their significant connections in their lives. If you like this video, please do feel free to subscribe to find more psychological videos like this, which we release on a regular basis. And if you have any suggestions for future topics in psychology that you'd like to explore, please do comment below. Until next time, I will see you later.